Hello, my oodles and noodles. We are back. We have returned from the depths of darkness and come back into the light. Yeah. So we're gonna chitty chat a little bit about the Licanius Trilogy. Now I have done a part one, two, three discussing each individual novel. You can check them down below. Check it all out. Take a gander, take a peek, whatever you feel like doing. I'm going to talk more broadly about the entire series because, heck, why not? So there's going to be spoilers. There's going to be no holding back. This is going to be a no holds barred punchathon. Of course, there's positive things to say. I do overall really love this series. It has a lot of flaws. There is definitely some editing that should have been done in many of the series, although it did get better as time went along. But overall, it was an incredibly fun series. And I would have to say, probably the best aspect of the Licanius trilogy is the way it foreshadowed things. Book one did a wonderful, wonderful job of foreshadowing what was to come. There's a lot of series that really attempt to leave little nuggets to give you just enough information that you want to learn more, but many times they fall short. It just ends up being a little frustrating, and then when the truths finally get revealed, they kind of really fall flat. The Licanius trilogy really did not have that issue, I find, most of the time. Things got wrapped up relatively quickly. So you would see a lot of foreshadowing of certain things, and then in the book two, and especially in book three, things suddenly got revealed in really rapid succession, but were done in a way that didn't feel overwhelming. It felt really nice. It felt good. As soon as you learned something, you were like, this makes sense. Sometimes I'd have to say 40-50% of the time you could sort of see where the story was going. You could make your assumption and you were probably going to be right, but it was always done in a way that was very satisfying. It was never something you're just like, ugh, of course it went this way, of course. So that was really, really nice to see. I like being teased, but teased in a way that doesn't make me want to punch the wall. You know, seeing Caden's development throughout the story. I'm going to assume you actually know this, like some general premise of the storyline. So please go watch the other three videos where I actually discuss them. Hopefully you've read them. So I'm gonna just assume you all know what the hell I'm talking about right now. If you don't, I'm sorry. It's a pain, but that's life. So Caden, our lovely and sad, tragic Caden, is probably one of the most fascinating characters I've ever seen, because when the book begins, you really believe that Davian and Asha are going to be these primary characters, which they are, of course. Weir sort of serves as like a backdrop character. He's semi-interesting, but he's really just the typical kind of noble son who's a nice guy, and he's fun. He's nice. He serves his purpose. Ashalia, or Asha, she has a fascinating flow to her story. She kind of starts off as this side character who then becomes semi-interesting in the sense of you're wondering where she's gonna go. How is her gift going to be returned to her, and then the nice little twist of her becoming this OP, pretty much godlike character near the end of the series, and her having so much power, especially after the augur abilities are completely removed from the world. That is a really, really, I don't want to call it a twist, but it's a really interesting premise, and it is going to be extremely interesting to see what the author does with it in the future series. My understanding is that there is going to be a continuation of the series, and Davian and Asha will be involved in it, although they will not be the primary interest. And that's going to involve a lot of the siblings who, I am blanking on their names right now, but there are two siblings within the story who are basically side characters. They don't really matter to one degree or another. But within the third novel, they come out of nowhere and basically save the asses of a lot of the main characters, especially Weir. And they supposedly were involved with this whole other backdrop storyline happening in another country that you know nothing about. It's just kind of teased. Something obviously happened to them. They've gained power, not only politically, but as well as physically, and you need to understand what happened there. So far, from what I've heard, the author will be expanding upon it within another series. And so we are going to get to see how Asha's basically OP status is going to be developed as well, hopefully. But to go back to Caden, you knew he was a main character. You knew he was important. That's pretty obvious from book one. But seeing him slowly develop and have to deal with, I mean, it's just, I don't even know how to describe. If I had his life, I would have probably gone nuts or been broken a long time ago. This is the kind of person who's obviously lived for thousands of years and so has had so many different variations of experiences throughout his entire life, and it is portrayed so well as you see this person who lost his memory on purpose, we find out, but lost his memory, and so has to slowly start dealing with this past of his that he only is getting little bits and pieces through flashes of memory, and then also hearing from other people, and then learning of all these decisions he made, horrible things he did, sometimes for a bad cause, and then after for even this more positive cause, but yet he still did very, very horrible things. And his coming to terms with them, and then also learning to develop his own abilities and figure out how to make things work and how to save people I found it was phenomenally done. And just it's just so tragic how the book ended, knowing as you realize a little bit beforehand, but just that last twist at the end when you realize that he basically is going to die regardless of what he does, that he is going to mimic being Davian and then let himself kill himself of the future, was an emotionally intense moment and was bittersweet as an ending. So they really pulled it off super well. Of course, the magic system within the entire trilogy is really interesting. You have this more, we can call it soft magic system with the gifted, where they're just basically pulling energy, using it. You don't really learn that much about the gifted's abilities because they're not a primary focus, but they are kind of cool. But really the augur abilities is much more of a hard magic, not as hard as some systems, but still pretty hard. And the combination of it utilizing the same gifted abilities and kind of overlapping over them and then like dominating the gifted abilities is really fascinating. So that's definitely one of the more interesting magic systems that I've seen within a trilogy. Excuse my English. And I really enjoyed it. The combat, even there's not that much hand-to-hand and weapons fighting within the novel, but when it is done, I find it was done very well, especially seeing the augurs with their ability to manipulate time, fight against normal people, and just completely dominate them and OP them, while simultaneously then shifting over to them fighting against other people who do have the ability to either go out of time as well, or simply through the use of their specialized armor, at the very least track and follow someone who's using their augur abilities. So that was really fun to see. I'd love to have it developed even more later on in the series, but obviously we're not going to be able to see that because the augur abilities have gone. Unless the author decides to bring back the great evil and somehow merge that into the later series. I doubt that's going to happen though, because it would kind of ruin all the work that Caden and Davian did, and of course Asha as well. So that was a really fun mix. I find really, if you're looking for a trilogy that has some great combat, some great character development, some great foreshadowing, a really interesting use of magic, um, I would have to say that the big bad in it is not that interesting. It's kind of similar to the dark one from the Wheel of Time. I just really didn't give a shit about the big bad, but the people all around. So you can definitely see that he was fully inspired by the Forsaken from the Wheel of Time. So there's really that sort of, you see that he took the concept, for anyone who hasn't read the Wheel of Time. So the Forsaken are these Aes Sedai. They're magic wielding people who in the past gave their souls over to this evil entity, the Dark One. Only within the Wheel of Time it's very clear that the Dark One is the Dark One. He's the bad guy, and they all know it. And the reason these Aes Sedai gave themselves over to him is for power. It's a pure lust of power. Whereas there was so much more complexity put into I don't even want to say, I hate even thinking of them as bad guys, because they really were overall pretty good, decent people. They thought what they were doing was right. These are immortals that conceptually you can't really understand their view of things, because they've lived for so long, they've seen so much darkness and evil, and they genuinely do think, and they're being tricked by this being. So they're not evil people, and that's what adds such an interesting side to them, on top of the fact that most of them were very close, best friends even of Caden. So even in their deaths, there's this emotional weight to every single death, because it's always generally Caden who's killing them. So it's always a sad moment when that happens, where you really get feels for the enemy in this series. The one thing though is that even though there is that depth, there is that weight, the third book really killed off a lot of people, whether it's the enemies or even people on our side, like Aaron. They were killed off kind of flippantly. Like, it was just done in a way that you just, okay, he's dead. It didn't matter. It was strange. It was strangely done. And for all that kind of, that's this ball of emotion that was built up over book one and book two towards all these people, the way many of them died was just kind of harsh, but also just too rushed. It was just too rushed. I really, really do feel, if there's any big, large weakness to this series, is that there should have been a fourth book. Things should have been stretched out a little bit more, and people should have died a little bit, with a little bit more fanfare to them, because it was just a little bit too quickly. It seemed like in the third book, just like a whole bunch of people died, or you found out people died, and it was just like, okay, they're dead, and that was it. There was no climax, there was no build up, there was no nothing, and so you were kind of left wanting in that regard. Luckily, as far as I'm concerned, it was saved by Caden's sacrifice at the end, but it was still kind of unfortunate. But overall, great. The flow of the book series was really fantastic. The foreshadowing, the pacing, the combat, the magic, character development overall was pretty fantastic. I found Davian a little bit stale to one degree, because he was built up to be this whole like, oh, Davian is so great, Davian is so nice, and this is why Caden is like backing him up. It's Davian who changed everything. But I just didn't really find Davian that interesting a person. He was cool, he was fun, but Asha and Caden were, to me, the bedrock, the foundation of the series. Davian seemed to just be this kind of person in the middle who's supposed to make you appreciate, what's right and what's wrong, I guess. So overall, we'll give this series, I would give this series an 8 on 10, to be honest. 8 on 10. Will take away 2 points, simply because I feel like there should have been a little bit more length to it. There should have been a little bit more development of certain aspects, especially how characters were removed. I would have liked to have seen the world more, but again, we're going to get those sequels set within the world, so we are going to get an expansion of the world and get to see a lot more, so that's going to be interesting. So 8 on 10, to be polite, to be kind, to be generous. I will say that I do highly recommend for future authors to steal more from the Wheel of Time, because as much as Robert Jordan fucked up in many ways by adding way too much detail to the Wheel of Time, there's so much there to pull from. It's fantastic. The Wheel of Time, and I would even say the Malazan Book of the Fallen, are two book series that if you just look at them from a world building perspective and just conceptually just how large they are, every fantasy author and even sci-fi author could learn so much from reading those books in terms of just scope, how to handle so much. So yeah, on that note, check it out, Licanius Trilogy. It is super, super good. And check out the other 3 reviews down below. Book 1, Book 2, Book 3. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, comment down below. You can check out the website geektales.ca. I also have everything in audio form. Podcast obviously is named the same as this YouTube channel, Geek Tales. Thanks again, everyone. Peace.